Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Recaps and Reacts with, just hit myself in the face with braids, me, Sarah, where I just recap and talk about my reactions to shows and TV shows that I'm interested in. And right now, we're talking about Bridgerton. So we're talking about Bridgerton episode 4 today. So let's just get started. And also I've noticed, as I always forget, I hope this does not become a thing. Please like my video, leave a chat in the comment. We can discuss. Tell me your thoughts of what you think about Bridgerton so far, or the episode, or whichever. Also, please think about subscribing to my channel if you like more of this content. But anywho, so I've noticed that I have not been saying the title of the episode before I start talking about the episode. I do that for every other show or movie that I'm covering, and yet for some reason with Bridgerton, I'm not doing that. So I'm gonna start now this episode, which we are in episode 4, and it is called An Offer from a Gentleman. And boy, if that's not a loaded title. But anywho, let's get started. So we open with Benedict and Sophie on the coach. If you remember last episode, it ended with Benedict and Sophie going back to Mayfair. And Sophie just has all these questions about her new employer. She's asking if the family's nice, if they have children. And Benedict's a little coy, not really saying too much, keeping the answers very short. They pull up in front of Bridgerton House, and Sophie says, "What are we doing in front of Bridgerton House? Are we just going to walk the rest of the way?" And Benedict's like, "You know my house." And Sophie says, "Everyone knows Bridgerton House." Again, Benedict's privilege is showing, because Bridgerton, the Bridgerton family, they are that family of Mayfair. So, anyway. So Sophie asks if, the family she's going to work for is down the street, down the way, because they're outside of Bridgerton House. And Benedict says, "It's a short walk." And she's like, "Well, how short?" As a matter of fact, "You're going to be working at Bridgerton House." And Sophie is like, "Nah, no, that's not going to happen." Benedict tells her it's her new place of employment, and he clarifies, she will not be working for him, but for, I guess, the mother. He just says he lives there part-time because he's taking Antony's place as the Viscount, and so he handles a lot of affairs, so he lives there half the time. I guess his other home is the bachelor pad. Sophie's still in shock. She's adamant that she is not going to work at Bridgerton House, and she starts walking the other way. And Benedict is like, "Where are you going?" And she's like, "I'm going to find employment somewhere else." And Benedict says, "It's going to be hard because I have written to other families in the area, and for some reason they won't employ you." Sophie says she'll go to the countryside, and Benedict's like, "Girl, after what you just went through at Cavender House, what happens if you have another family like that? Or another Cavender, basically." Sophie says if she knew she were coming to Bridgerton House, then she just would have stayed at Cavender House. And Benedict is like, "Look, I'm just trying to help." Sophie says she's not sure about what the other families are saying, but she's sure it's some kind of mix-up. And Benedict says, "Of course." Then Sophie and Benedict walk into Bridgerton House. So when Benedict made the comment about how other families do not want to hire Sophie, and he's reached out to his friends and they don't want to hire her. So if you remember on the first episode, the second episode, when Lady Penwood found out that Sophie went to the masquerade ball, I'm pretty sure that has something to do with it. This is not confirmed, but in this episode, I don't know if it's going to be confirmed later on, but we remember that Lady Penwood did say she was going to make sure that she was not going to be able to be hired in London. So that's probably what's happening here. Benedict and Sophie enter Bridgerton House, and they're waiting for Violet. Violet comes down and greets both of them, and Mrs. Wilson is there too. Violet pulls Benedict to the side while they're having a conversation. Mrs. Wilson and Sophie, I guess, is going through a little mini interview. And Violet asks Benedict if she received any of her letters, which I'm sure you didn't, because you wouldn't have Sophie here. She tells him that we have no positions open and also that Mrs. Wilson has heard things about Sophie, bad things, and they shouldn't hire her. And Benedict is like, Mother, I don't listen to rumors and I trust Sophie because basically they have been with each other for several days in the countryside and he didn't see anything wrong with her. He also tells Violet that Sophie saved his life. And with that being said, Violet was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And he says, yes, but he wouldn't have been okay had Sophie not been there. And Violet is like, okay, so she's definitely going to hire Sophie at this point because she saved one of her children's lives. So that's all she needs to know. So Violet goes over to talk to Sophie and Mrs. Wilson, and Violet starts giving her a mini interview. Based on her qualifications, Violet feels that she would be a great lady's maid, I believe, for Eloise and Francesca. With Eloise, she feel like Sophie will be a good push. And then for Hyacinth, she feels that she needs a companion. So Sophie's working at Bridgerton House. Sophie thanks them all, and with that, everyone starts to go their separate ways. So Violet and Benedict leave off, and Sophie and Mrs. Wilson are going to the maid quarters or where, the staff is. I thought this was an interesting scene. I'm sure that was the intent, what I'm going to say. But Sophie and Mrs. Wilson kind of are below. Violet and Benedict are ascending up the stairs to their rooms, and Benedict and Sophie kind of look at each other. So I felt like it was a metaphor that Benedict is above Sophie. Not the hierarchy, but within society, Benedict is above Sophie, and Sophie is a maid, so she is still staying below, whereas Benedict is ascending to the top. So I thought that was a cool scene. So after the opening credits, it shows cuts to a scene with Violet and Lord Anderson. They're at the Bridgerton house having tea and biscuits. They start playing handsies with one another. You can see that they're touching each other with their pinkies, being a little flirtatious, and Miss Wilson comes in with the biscuits and they just separate. Violet shoots to the other side of the couch, and Lord Anderson he's kind of cool. He's just like, okay. And she starts fanning herself. Violet starts fanning herself. And Mrs. Wilson puts the biscuits down and she's walking out the room. But as she's walking out the room, she has a little smirk on her face. Lady Whistledown is narrating. She mentions Benedict is back in town and that she's going to keep an eye out on him. Then it shows Queen Charlotte and Agatha talking to each other. And Charlotte is excited because Benedict is back, and now she's like, we can find a match for him because I'm over hearing about these maid wars. Queen Charlotte also wants to prove Lady Whistledown wrong because remember they both made a bet at the beginning of, at the end of episode 1 that Benedict Queen Charlotte thinks that Benedict is going to find a match. Penelope is like, nah, because remember, Penelope's Lady Whistledown, and Penelope's like, nah, I don't think he's gonna find it, but okay. And so they made a bet about it. During this talk, Agatha is walking with Queen Charlotte, and in the hallway, she looks up and she sees a portrait of her and Queen Charlotte when Lady Danbury is one of her ladies in waiting when they were young. So shout out again to Queen Charlotte series because that's a nod to that because it was back in that era. And also, I think it kind of just shows just how long Agatha has been by Queen Charlotte's side. The next scene shows Mrs. Wilson giving Sophie a tour of the Bridgerton maid quarters. I don't know what it's called, but where the maids are, the coachman, the whole staff of Bridgerton, which is nuts. It's a production down there. And it's crazy, but anywho, you see her walking around with Mrs. Wilson. Mrs. Wilson just kind of telling her, what's this and what's that. Footman John introduces himself. We were introduced to Footman John in the first episode. Then she meets the other staff. She meets not the whole staff, but probably the staff that she's going to interact with the most because there's no way she can meet that whole staff in one sitting because it's insane. They ask her if they asked Sophie if she's ever worked at a place like Bridgerton House. She says no. She said at the most we had 8 people at my last house. And another maid, which I think we are going to know later on in the episode, her name is Celia. She asked, 8 people. Well, how did you get with all the mending, all of the cleaning? Like, who did all that? And she lists off some other chores. And Sophie says, I did. And I kid you not, that staff, they like just stopped and looked at her like, are you serious? But also, that's kind of a threat because if you have one person that can do that many tasks, then they have to step up their game. So Celia is going to take some treats out to the family because it looks like they're hosting something, and Sophie offers to help. Mrs. Wilson says, no, Sophie, that's not your job. But she's like, I can help. It's fine. Because Celia says she needs some help, so Sophie doesn't mind. The next scene, we show the Bridgerton family greeting Gregory. I guess Gregory was gone somewhere, but it shows him coming back and they're all hugging him. He mentions how his taste has matured and that he's grown a little bit of a patch of hair on his chin. Sophie serves the food and Benedict is eyeing Sophie, looking very uncomfortable. And then Sophie and Benedict lock eyes, kind of an awkward moment. Then someone mentions going to the drawing room. So the Bridgerton family all go to the drawing room. When they get to the drawing room, the Bridgerton family, Benedict pulls Violet to the side and says he's going to find the lady in silver. Violet says she thought you were done with that. Benedict says, absolutely not. Violet tells Benedict that she will ask Mrs. Wilson to get all of the miniatures from all the ladies who came to the masquerade ball and they will go through them. I find out later on in this episode, because I was like, what in the world are miniatures? But miniatures are pictures, like little pictures. And also, I'm trying to figure out why they just didn't suggest this in the first place, because I felt like Benedict has always felt very strongly about seeing the lady or trying to find the lady in silver, so I don't understand why Violet didn't suggest that beforehand, but whatevs. Also, Benedict tells Violet that the other maid that they're going to hire, that he wants her to hire, she's more than capable, but Violet don't care. She's like, great, sure, anything for my son who wants to find a wife. So she's just excited that he's on this pursuit again. Next scene, we're introduced to Hazel. That is the maid that Benedict was telling Violet about. Sophie walks into like the maid or the staff quarters or the kitchen, I guess, and she's so excited. She runs up to her and gives her a big hug. Sophie tells Hazel that she was worried about her. Hazel says that Mr. Bridgerton said that you, Sophie, wanted to find me a new place of employment, and Mr. Bridgerton kept his word. So Hazel is leaving. So after Hazel says that Mr. Bridgerton is a man of his word, Sophie kind of has like a little questioning look on her face afterwards. So with this scene, we're kind of told a little bit about Benedict and how he's a sweet person. So Hazel was the maid that was at Cavender House with Sophie. That was the first maid that was getting assaulted by Cavender and his clique that Sophie was protecting, that she stuck up for or threw water on them for, and she kind of ran off. So I guess she was working at Cavender House as well. And Benedict, obviously knowing the conditions that they were being under, he, on his own volition, decided to get her a job at Bridgerton House. So, that kind of proves to what Sophie was saying before, how he's a kind person. Next scene shows Hyacinth doing her dance lessons. Remember, Eloise is supposed to be chaperoning Hyacinth, but Eloise is over there with her nose in a book. Hyacinth reminds Eloise that she's supposed to be looking at her, chaperoning, and Eloise is like, I'm not interested. Eloise tells Hyacinth that Mama is crazy if she thinks me chaperoning you is going to rub off on me, because I do not care. And then Hyacinth says, why does anything have to rub off on each other? Why do we have to influence, she said. Why do we have to influence one another? Why can't we just be? Hyacinth offers to read a book about a ballerina, Marie Salé. Sophie says under her breath that Marie Salé was actually a pioneer and she created her own steps. Looking up, Sophie realizes that Hyacinth and Eloise are both staring at her. Sophie tells them that she read the book. This intrigues Eloise and asks her what else has she read. And they start discussing books, and Eloise gets excited. She's intrigued by Sophie, which, doesn't happen often with other women. So she likes having a conversation with Sophie. And then Hyacinth just kind of pouts and just sits in her corner. We cut to Violet in her room, in her bedroom, and Mrs. Wilson walks in. Violet tells her that she wants to have tea, evening tea, alone, but doesn't know how to ask or doesn't know how to do that. Mrs. Wilson says she comes up with a plan. Mrs. Wilson says that she just needs to get everyone out of the house. The children, they need to get out of the house. Violet tells her she's been trying to get Francesca to host a dinner, so maybe she can do that. Mrs. Wilson agrees and says she will take care of everything and make sure that the evening tea goes unnoticed. So she's going to cover for she's going to cover for Violet. Violet's going to fake sick the night that Francesca is going to host this dinner so she can be alone to have evening tea with Lord Anderson. They never say it's Lord Anderson, but we know she wants to have some time alone with Lord Anderson. Sensing Violet's uneasiness, Miss Wilson says, everyone drinks tea. And Violet says, yeah, everyone drinks tea. Then Mrs. Wilson says that life is meant to be lived. And on that note, Mrs. Wilson leaves the room. And Violet looks at a picture of Edwin. The next scene, Sophie runs into Benedict in the hallway of Bridgerton House. Benedict and Sophie, Benedict asks Sophie how she's getting along. Sophie says that she's delightfully surprised by Hyacinth and Eloise. I'm not gonna lie, delightfully surprised sounds a little shady to me. I don't know why. I feel like it's kind of like, I didn't think they were gonna interest me, but they did. So that seems shady to me, but it's not meant to be taken that way, but I took it that way. Benedict asked if she is still mad at him for kind of tricking her out working at Bridgerton House. Sophie says she must thank him and also thanks him for hiring Hazel. Benedict is buttoning a button on his collar and he's struggling, so Sophie offers to fix the button for him or help him with the button. And this is a little passionate moment, because they are like literally this close to one another, all up in their face, probably breathing each other's air. Well, obviously they're breathing each other's air, but I mean, y'all know what I mean. They're just all up in each other's face. But Sophie helps him with the button. She buttons it up. He thanks her, and then they walk off, or Sophie walks off, and Benedict just kind of stares longingly after her. All of the Bridgerton ladies go to Lady Danbury's house, including Penelope. She is there because she's a Bridgerton lady now. So at Danbury's dinner, there is Lady Mondrich, and also, sidebar, I've been saying Lady Mondrick this whole entire time. I was rewatching this episode last night, and I see that it's pronounced Lady Mondrich. So please bear with me, as I will probably be saying Mondrick or Mondrich interchangeably. But anyway, so Lady Mondrich, Lady Danbury, Penelope are all there. Lady Mondrich asks Violet about Benedict and if he's been able to find his lady in the silver dress. Violet says no, and they looked at every miniature, which is a picture. They looked at every picture at the masquerade ball, and they found none of these ladies, none of those ladies was the lady in silver. Lady Danbury looks at Penelope and says, well, it looks like you might win this wager after all, the bet between her and Queen Charlotte. And Penelope says, oh my gosh, you have to know that I was backed into a corner with Queen Charlotte. And Violet says, oh, you're a wiser woman than I am. You should have taken the bet. And then Penelope kind of looks a little sullen and says, I don't know if I'm just now a pawn in Queen Charlotte's games. And so, yeah, she's not feeling too good about it. Lady Mondrich asks if Benedict knows how the lady in silver looks. And if he does know, it can be described to Lady Whistledown, and then that can go into the next Whistledown issue, and then maybe they can find her. And when she says this, Lady Danbury kind of looks at Lady Mondridge with a thoughtful look on her face. I do think that Benedict and Penelope talked about this before, about Penelope putting that in the next Lady Whistledown issue, but they didn't want to do that. So, anyway, but they're bringing it up again. I don't know. Violet is having a conversation with Francesca, and Violet overhears Eloise and Hyacinth talking about this lady who knows all these things. And Violet's like, who on earth are y'all talking about? And they say, it's Sophie. Francesca says, to Violet, she says, it's very unusual that she knows all these things or that she's so well educated. Francesca doesn't say well educated, but that's what we're getting. Anyway, Francesca tells Violet it is unusual that she's so well educated for being a maid. And Violet kind of, thinks, yeah. And then she kind of just sits there and thinks about it. Back at the men's lodge, the men are kind of having their little get together. So you have Lord Mondridge, Colin, Benedict, and Lord Kilmartin. So they're having like a little sesh themselves. And Colin is asking Benedict how the search is going for the lady in silver. And Benedict kind of gives him a weird look, and he says, I heard it from Penelope. In this moment, the friend from Cavender's house appears. I don't know if they ever said his name, but this is the guy that was talking to Benedict about his mistress at the Cavender house. And the friend also has a female, which we're assuming is the said mistress. And they look very happy. They say hey to each other. I don't think the friend introduces the mistress. I can't remember, but I don't think that the friend introduces the mistress to Benedict. But then he excuses themselves and they leave. Then Benedict is kind of just staring off after them, and Lord Mondridge, Benedict is staring after them, and Colin says, I don't understand that life. That life is not for me. And Benedict looks at Colin and he says, Anthony had a mistress. Before Kate, of course. And Colin is like, really? And Lord Mondridge says, I'm not about that life either, but it is very common. 50% of these men have mistresses. Then Lord Mondridge says a quote that I loved. He says, we must marry according to class, but we don't always love that way. And I thought that was a nice line. I loved that line. And then Benedict looks back at his friend and the mistress, and you can tell he has a thought on his face. Now think about the title of this series and think about this whole interaction. So just hold on to that because we're going to get to it. Next scene, Violet invited Sophie into the tea room at Bridgerton House. Violet's asking questions about Sophie's family, and Sophie mentions that both of her parents had passed away. But Sophie also doesn't want to really talk about her family too much. Sophie talks about her time in the cottage with Benedict, and Sophie says that was the happiest time of her life. Violet then offers Sophie a full-time position and says that, Eloise and Hyacinth adore her, and she says they all do. And then Sophie says that she has to think about it, like she'll consider it. And I'm not going to lie, I thought Sophie was going to be working full-time. I didn't know it was a temporary position, but yeah. Then after Sophie says that she'll consider it, Violet offers her cake. And I thought that was a nice moment because they're Bridgertons. They're so sweet. Next scene shows Agatha and Violet walking, I guess, having a promenade. Violet says there's something about Sophie that makes her want to protect her. Agatha then tells Violet that she's thinking of offering something to Lady Mondridge, but not sure how she'll react to it. Violet says, well, will it harm her in any way? And Agatha says, no, actually, I think it would be a great benefit for her. But Agatha also is honest and says, but it's more so selfishly for me. Then Violet, kind of projecting a little bit, says, you must do things that make you happy. You must do things that make you feel free, because she deserves it. She does so much for everybody else, Lady Danbury. She does so much for everybody else. that she deserves to be happy. This too, when Violet is saying all of this is also something true of herself, as she's a mother and she's doing things for everybody else, that she needs to make herself happy and get with Lord Anderson for some evening tea. Wink, wink. We know what that means. So she's kind of talking about the both of them. Then at the end of that conversation, Violet tells Agatha, to quote Mrs. Wilson, "Life is meant to be lived." Later that night, Benedict runs into Sophie in a room in the house. I don't know what room it is in the house, but Sophie's looking out at the window up at the sky, and Benedict is watching her from behind. She senses Benedict, or she knows it's Benedict, and she tells him that she misses their time in the cottage. Benedict is very close to her because he's kind of like right up on her, behind her. Then they turn and look at one another. Then she tells him goodnight. As she's walking, he says, "Please don't go." She tells him that Violet offered a permanent job for her. Then he asks if she will take it, and she says she doesn't know if that's wise. She says she's always dreamt about being with a family like theirs. Benedict walks over to Sophie and puts his hand on her and says that she deserves more. Sophie says she's not sure if it's wise to stay there. Benedict asks her why, and she can't answer. They both know why, but Benedict doesn't want to jeopardize anything if she stays there. Then she tells him goodnight, and she leaves. Next scene shows Agatha bringing Lady Mondrick to the castle to go see Queen Charlotte. And Agatha is just listing all these things. Make sure you curtsy, because she likes a deep curtsy, a deep bow with a curtsy. Just basically saying everything to make sure that Queen Charlotte will be happy. And Lady Mondrick is like, I didn't know all this had to be done for a simple tea. But of course, Lady Danbury has something more up her sleeve for Lady Mondrick. Lady Mondrick tells Queen Charlotte that she thinks that she's found the lady in silver for Benedict. Queen Charlotte is pleased by this, and then Agatha looks at Queen Charlotte like, okay. And then Queen Charlotte says, fine, fine, fine. Yes, she can be my next lady in waiting. And Lady Mondrick is like, wait, what? And then Lady Mondrick leaves. Queen Charlotte tells Agatha that she is just in time for tea, and then pats the seat next to her to come sit down. Next scene, Lady Whistledown is narrating. She mentions that the maid wars seem to have passed. They've calmed down a bit, and now it's time for a new gossip. So word on the street is they're trying to figure out who is going to be the next family that's moving in next to the Bridgerton house. I wasn't really aware that the Bridgerton house, the house next to the Bridgerton house was vacant, but whatever, unless I missed something from last season, I don't remember. Violet goes to Benedict and tells Benedict that Lady Mondrick thinks that she found the lady in silver. Lady Danbury sent Violet a letter about Lady Mondrick possibly finding the lady in silver for Benedict. So Violet goes to Benedict and tells Benedict all of the things that Lady Mondrick had told her and thinks that she may have found the lady in silver. Violet tells her the lady's name is Mrs. Hollis, and Benedict does not look that excited about it. Violet tells him that she's inviting them for tea, and then tells him not to mention the glove, and he agrees. Remember the white glove. So, next scene shows Benedict and Violet having tea with the Hollises. And Benedict doesn't look too happy about it. He doesn't look too enthused because we know he's probably in love with Sophie, even though these two don't say it yet. But we know these two are like in love at this point. Benedict starts asking Lady Hollis some questions about some of the kind of related to the things that he was having a conversation with the lady in silver at the masquerade ball. They end up speaking French to one another, and Benedict tells Lady Hollis that someone told him that his French pronunciation's a little off. Lady Hollis says, well, whoever told you that is a fool, and Benedict kind of makes a face, and then Sophie walks in at that moment with some tea in hand, and she asks if they all need a refill, and the Hollises says they do. So they start pouring, or Sophie starts pouring tea for each of the Hollises. And then she gets to Benedict, and This whole entire moment when Sophie is there, Benedict looks so uncomfortable. As Sophie is pouring this tea, he is getting like more frightened, more uncomfortable the closer she gets to serving him tea, because I think he feels like this is so degrading for her. And or he feels it probably so degrading for her. I don't know. But when she gets to Benedict, she goes to pour tea, and he says he's good and puts his hand over the cup, and the tea spills onto Benedict's hand, and Benedict says, "Damn it!" and drops his cup with the tea. And Sophie immediately like goes down to clean it up, and Benedict says, "Leave it." And then Sophie's like, "No," and she's cleaning, and Benedict says, "Leave it," very sternly. Then Sophie jumps up to go get more tea. Violet is looking at Benedict like, when these ladies leave, I'm about to lay into you. When I tell y'all, Violet gave the mama look. Ooh, and y'all know what I'm talking about. When your mama just stares at you and doesn't say anything, Violet was giving that man that look. She was pissed to the highest level of pistivity. And so, anyway, Sophie goes and gets more tea, and Violet tells the Hollises, it's been a long day. And the Hollises kind of take the hint, and they're like, yeah, we're going to go. And Lady Hollis says, it was always my dream to come to the Bridgerton house. Benedict says, well, you have when you were at the masquerade ball, right? Then Lady Hollis says, I was going to come, but I fell ill, so I couldn't come. And Benedict seems relieved, pops up, and he's like, yeah, okay, nice seeing you. Because he's relieved that it's not the lady in silver. Violet goes to see the Hollises off. Sophie comes into the room to clean up the tea. Benedict offers to help her, and she says, don't be ridiculous. Benedict apologizes to Sophie and said that he didn't know that she was going to serve tea. Sophie says, why does it even matter? You're an eligible man looking for a lady suitor. He said that she shouldn't have to witness that. And she gets upset with him and tells him that he shouldn't say silly things like that. Basically, don't say stuff like that to get my hopes up. And she says he is ruining everything. And then she's like, don't you have somewhere else to go? Like, shouldn't you be at your bachelor pad? Because remember, Benedict said that they probably wouldn't be running into each other that much because that house is so massive. But yet, they have run into each other quite a bit this episode. Benedict says, if you want me to go to the bachelor pad, then I'll go there if that makes you more comfortable. And she said it would. So Sophie, after this exchange, Sophie leaves the room, but before she leaves the room, she tells him that he should pursue Miss Hollis because she was delightful. And then Benedict looks defeated as she leaves. I want to point out in this moment that I feel like Sophie's been kind of a brat since she's met Benedict. Now, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I do understand her plight. But Benedict has been trying his hardest to do right by Sophie, and she does not really seem that grateful, When he took her, he saved her from Cavendish House, she got upset because now she was unemployed, which I can understand is very stressful. But it's Bridgerton, and he's like, I got you. Like, I'll find you another job. But she was mad at him about that. And now she's saying, we're here at Bridgerton House, and he's done all these things for her, has gotten her a full-time job at a lovely house with, like, the dream family, and got her friend a job, too. And she's up here telling him in his own house that he's ruining everything and that he needs to go to a different house to his bachelor pad so she can be comfortable. And he's like, okay, I'll do that for you. And I'm like, girl, I need you to be a little nicer, a little bit more grateful. I'm not saying like completely grateful, but it's a lot. She's doing a lot. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know. I might have an unpopular opinion with that, but it's a lot. There's a lot of like, I get why she's upset, but it's a little over the top, because I'm just like, For y'all to be up here talking about y'all are in different positions, sometimes she doesn't act like it. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah. Comment and tell me what y'all think about it, please, because I'm sure I'm not the only one, but just let me know what you think. So, Lord Kilmartin and Francesca are having a moment, and Francesca fakes her pinnacle. Remember what pinnacle is. Again, I'm trying to keep it cute because we are back in olden days. So, it is called the pinnacle. Lord Kilmartin calls Francesca out and says, you don't have to fake it. And he says this with love. But Francesca says that she's never had her pinnacle and she is sure this is probably why they don't have a child yet and what is wrong with her. And then John, ever so lovely and ever so sweetly, says there is nothing wrong with her. He tells her that there is nothing that he will not do for her, and he will strive to do whatever she wants. And also tells her that they are perfect and she is perfect and they are perfect together just the way they are. And they have all the time in the world for the rest. And then they kiss. And I thought this is just a very sweet moment because I do like Francesca and Kilmartin. They're a very sweet couple. Next scene, Agatha goes to Lord Mondrich's house to meet with Lady Mondrich. Lady Mondrich is upset. Lord Mondrich tells Agatha that Lady Mondrich is upset because she hasn't talked to him since she came back from the tea with Agatha and Queen Charlotte. And he says, I know it's not with me. And Agatha says, yeah, no, it's me. So Lady Mondrich comes into the room and she is pissed. She is not happy. Lady Mondrich says that she does not want to be a lady in waiting for Queen Charlotte. And Lord Mondrich is like, what is going on? Agatha asks her, why don't you want to be a lady in waiting? And Lady Mondrich says, I simply just do not want to be. She says, do you not want to be or are you scared to be? And she says, again, it is an honor to be a lady in waiting. This is something that most people wouldn't even dare to dream about. And Lady Mondrich says, I didn't dream about this. Agatha tells her, you didn't dream of Kent House either, and yet here you are. She says, Agatha, dropping gems, just gem after gem. She says that you don't need to dream something to say yes. All you need is the opportunity to show that you are worthy, and you are worthy. And I absolutely loved that line. Absolutely loved it. Agatha tells Lady Mondrich again that she's exactly what Queen Charlotte needs. She tells her, look at the way that you come back at me. Look at the way we converse. That's what she needs. Lady Mondrich says that she is not from this world, and and Agatha says, I wasn't from this world either, but I told myself once I got into this world that I was going to become unstoppable, and I am unstoppable. She tells Lady Mondrich, look at the world that she helped Queen Charlotte create. She reminds Lady Mondrich again that she is not like others. She's not like the other women. She will challenge Queen Charlotte. She will push back on her. And although she is the queen, you will not talk to her as such. And that's exactly what she needs. She needs that type of friendship. Lady Mondrich says, I can't fill your shoes to Agatha. And Agatha's like, I don't need you to fill my shoes. I need you to have your own shoes. And she is telling her to rise. And the Mondrich smile. And I loved this moment so much because it's so sweet. Because if we remember on, Queen Charlotte series, Lady Danbury was the one that was pushing for, things to do, pushing for equal rights, all these things. And remember the parties, Lady Danbury had asked Queen Charlotte to come to her house for parties. And that was something I think that probably had never been done back then. And now it's a standard that the queen will come to these parties. So it's kind of a full circle moment. And Lady Danbury is passing the torch on to Lady Mondrich. So I loved this scene. Violet stops by Benedict's bachelor pad. Violet apologizes to Benedict about the Hollises not being his lady in silver. And Benedict says, I'm kind of over it at this point anyway. And he says that I think the lady in silver is just my imagination. And Violet says, maybe that's why you were drawn to her, because she's in your imagination. And Benedict's like, thanks, Mom. And Violet says, no. She's like, I imagine your father, that he will walk around a corner any day now. And obviously that won't happen. But she says, but I have to live in reality because that's where love is. Reality feeds your heart. And then she tells him that he will find another woman that gives him a spark. In the maid quarters, or wherever, the kitchen, wherever all the staff, where they work. So they're all in a corner, kind of shooting the breeze. Footman John is looking at Hazel longingly, and he's like, "You're amazing. You are so intriguing." Because I guess she was doing some kind of, I don't know, magic trick, something. But he's just mesmerized by this lady. Oh, no, excuse me. My note says that Footman John called her fascinating. And Mrs. Wilson comes downstairs and she says, "Beat it. I need y'all out of the house. Y'all have the rest of the night out. Go do something. Y'all can do something, but it can't be here." And so with that, Celia invites Sophie to go to the tavern, and Sophie happily accepts. And so Celia, Footman John, Sophie, and Hazel all go to the tavern. Sophie tells Mrs. Wilson that she has been offered the full-time position at Bridgerton House and she's going to take it. Mrs. Wilson says, "That's wonderful because you're cherished here." And then Miss Wilson walks off. Sophie looks a little sad at this moment, and I'm not sure exactly why, because maybe she wants to be more in the Bridgerton family. I'm not really sure, but there was kind of like a little sad moment on her face. So the Bridgertons are having dinner at Kilmartin's and Francesca's house. So Francesca's hosting the dinner. Sans, Violet, and Benedict. Now we know what Violet's doing, having her evening tea, keeping it cute, but y'all know what I mean. Benedict, I think, is licking his wounds with Sophie, I guess. Yeah. Hyacinth is getting treats with Eloise at the house, at Lord Kilmartin's and Francesca's house. Hyacinth asks Eloise, she says, "Don't you think everything is perfect here?" And Eloise is like, "Listen, I can't talk about any of this stuff with you anymore. I don't want to hear about it." And Hyacinth just kind of looks at her and says, "I thought it was just me, but I realized that you're just a selfish person," and walks off. And Eloise just kind of stares at her, kind of in shock, but taking that in too. I do want to say in this moment too, this is, I think, the second time Eloise has been called selfish that I can recall, because I remember Cressida said that she was selfish last year or last season, and I don't know if Penelope said the same thing. She may have said the same thing, but that is a running theme with Eloise, so I'm pretty sure we're going to touch on that little theme when it comes to her season. So then we get to the next scene. Kilmartin and Francesca are told that they have a visitor, and it is Michaela, Kilmartin's cousin. Michaela has come to visit Lord Kilmartin and Francesca. And Francesca says, "Oh, it's so good to see you." And Michaela says, "Are you sure? Because it looks like you've seen a ghost." So back at Bridgerton House, it's time for evening tea. So Violet is in lingerie in her bedroom, just kind of sitting there. And then she hears a knock at the door, and she gets up and she is rushing to find a position. She sits in like three, I guess I'm trying to do a position, but anyway, she sits in like several positions before she says, "Come in." And Lord Anderson walks in looking delicious, looking fine. And so he comes in and he has a smile on his face and he says, Mrs. Wilson says, "We're having tea in a different place." And Violet says, "You're having me. I'm the tea." I said, "You better, girl, come on, Violet. Come on." After she tells him that she is the tea he is having, they start kissing. And Lord Anderson says, "We can take it slow." And Violet says, "Get undressed." Lord Anderson gets undressed and Violet is like, "Okay." So then we cut to Benedict going to the Bridgerton house. He goes to the Bridgerton house and he's going inside. And as he's going inside, you see Footman John, Hazel, Celia, and Sophie coming out the other way. So they just kind of missed each other. Sophie says, wait, I forgot my coin purse. So she has to go back into the house and get her money to go to the tavern. She goes into going up the stairs of the maid quarters, I guess, and there is Benedict, and they run into each other. So they make out in the hallway, among other things. I'm just trying to keep it cute. So they make out in the hallway, and you have to watch the series to see what else they do. But Benedict is saying all these sweet things to her. He says he can't live without her and that she deserves better, and he wants to give that to her. Then he says, Sophie, in the heat of the moment, Sophie, be my mistress. And the proverbial record scratches. Sophie just stops completely. And just Benedict kills the moment. And Sophie stops, and then she just walks off, leaving Benedict shocked. When she reaches the bottom of the stairs, she looks back up at Benedict, and Benedict looks confused. She says nothing, and she just walks out. Then we cut back to Mama Violet and Lord Anderson, and they're in bed, and Mama Violet is just in there laughing. And Lord Anderson is like, are you okay? And she says, I'm just happy. So then we cut back to Sophie walking with the crew to the tavern. And as they're walking to the tavern, we pan over to the next house. And Lady Whistledown is narrating in the background. And we see that the family who is moving in to the house next to the Bridgertons is Lady Penwood, Rosamond, and Posey. And on top of that, Varley is their housekeeper. And I do want to mention that when Varley opens the door for them to come into the house, when she's closing it, her face looks a little sad or worried or something. So that's just something to note. So I wonder if, obviously that's probably going to be a foreshadowing, but woo, that was the end of episode 4, y'all. That was the end of the first half of Bridgerton season 4. So this is where I have stopped before, and this is where I left off at. So we're now going to be able to go into the second part of Bridgerton. But what a first half, you know? What an episode. This was a great episode. Liked this episode. Besides Sophie kind of getting on my nerves a little bit. But yeah, it's a lot going on in this episode. And also, I have noticed a lot with Gregory and Hyacinth that we're kind of focusing on them. They're maturing now, and I guess we're getting them into gear to have their own seasons. I am very curious if we are going to have a season with Gregory and Hyacinth. I mean, I don't care either way because they're children, so I don't know, but... And also, I don't know if Bridgerton will stay on that long because y'all know Netflix likes those 5-season series. So I don't know. We are on season 4, and Eloise will be hopefully a good one. I'm not going to say too much because I thought Penelope and Colin were going to be a good season, and it wasn't. And I was thinking that Benedict was about to be a flop, but I think Benedict season's great. So I enjoy it. Anyway, that's episode 4. Please like, comment, subscribe. I will be talking about episode 5 here shortly. So excited for that because I haven't seen that episode yet. So I'm really excited for that. And yeah, please stop by next week for my other videos. I'm covering other shows as well that you may be interested in. So please check them out. Yeah, that's all. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And I will see y'all next time. Bye.